Okay, hey everybody. I'm your Thursday, Friday, Monday guy. It's Monday, March something or other. I don't know because I wasn't paying attention this morning when I got up. And so I'm here. My wife is joining me, Sandy, and she's just joining me as an observer pretty much. And we're doing Ecclesiastes chapter 2. And it's kind of, let's see, I wanted to highlight that it was written by King Solomon. He reigned from 970 to 931 BC. And we know King Solomon was the son of David, and he actually took the throne before David had expired, before he died. He was one of the wisest kings that ever lived, and he knew about different, like he was the guy that said, you know, cut the baby in half and each of you can share it or something like that. But he was a pretty smart guy. And so, I mean, if he wrote Ecclesiastes, then he probably has something to tell us, and they've kept it around all these thousands of years. So I'd say it's pretty useful to know. And the verses that we're highlighting today are 2:11, 2:15 through 16, and 2:18 through 19. That's what we're highlighting. But I wanted to start out with just maybe a little piece of a story, and then talking about what's going on. So Ecclesiastes, as you remember, the first one was just talking about the vanity of life, which is kind of the meaninglessness of life. So in the New American Standard Version, which I have right here, the phrases are a little bit different in the verses, so I made sure that I highlighted what it was, the different words that they use. One of the biggest changes between New American Standard and New International Version and the version that I read, the King James Version, is that and I have King James and New King James Version, and the difference is that instead of calling it meaningless, they say vanity. So
that was something new I learned yesterday.
Yeah. So and everything is in vain, or everything is meaningless without God, right? So that's supposed to be the lesson that we're learning from this. And but the first thing I wanted to start was, it said, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure. So basically he's gonna see what folly brings him. He's gonna figure out what's going on. But that's not the important part. The important part, let me look at it through here, because I think it's gonna be an easier read as far as that goes, using the new language in there. And so because the idea of what he's saying, he's going to say, is that he planted vineyards and he did all these things that were so awesome and just neat, and then in the end, he didn't find any pleasure in it at all. So here it is. This is a newer Bible. We don't use it that often. I do it for reference mostly. So the pages are a little tight yet. That's a nice way to say it, right? Here it is, Ecclesiastes. I know it took me a while to get there, but if you're watching a man on the pulpit do this, it's sometimes a labor, because you want to get there for him. I know you're watching. You want to get there for me, and as the pages flip over. All right, so the emptiness of pleasure. So that's where we're at. I said to myself, go ahead. Now with the other verses, just to let you know, the King James Version is going to be just fine, or whatever version you have, you'll understand it. But for the first part, I'm going to read it out of this New American Standard. I said to myself, go ahead, I will test you with pleasure, enjoy what is good, but it turned out to be futile. I said about laughter, it is madness, and about pleasure, what does this accomplish? I exposed with my mind the pull of wine on my body, and my mind still guiding me with wisdom, and how to grasp folly until I could see what is good for people to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. All right, so I increased my achievement. So the first chapter, he checked out how it was to like play around and do whatever, and now he's increasing his kingdom. So he increased his achievements. He built I built a house, and I planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself and planted every kind of fruit tree in them. Well, that sounds just like what I did. So, and I wanted to read that. I didn't acquire male and female servants. I never got that good. But I will tell you this, at one point in my life, and this is funny because you can see how we don't learn lessons, right? At one point in my life, I had 4 cars and 2 motorcycles and a pool table in the garage and a 45-foot swimming pool and all those things. And never had time to use it, and I had amassed a whole bunch of treasure and never had time to use it. So I got the lesson that amassing too much treasure that you could use, not more than you can use, is futile as well. So I figured that one out because I wasn't smart enough to read the Bible yet and figure out that all the lessons were in there. So instead, I did that one on my own. But now, as an older man, I lost everything at one point, and now I've gained it all back, and gained it back in multitudes. But after everything was said and done, and we were retired and just sitting here, and I had planted a vineyard, and I had planted fruit trees all over, and I'd made a little park for myself. I mean, it kind of like fit hand in hand with all this. I found that it was all pretty much meaningless. It was vain. It was in vain because it wasn't anything to serve the Lord. It was just pretty much self-serving, and I did it for myself. And that's kind of where we're going to get into that. I mean, it's nothing. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't sin. I just amassed treasure. I just amassed treasure here on earth, which, you know, I was going to church and I was doing the right thing. I wasn't sinning, but I realized that at some point it was meaningless. What was the point of life if I wasn't? I mean, okay, now I've been introduced to Christ Jesus, so I'm going to heaven. But what about this waiting period in between? Well, I know in Ephesians it says not to sit idle and, you know, don't just wait around for Jesus to come back. So, I mean, we made ourselves busy by having gardens and doing other stuff, but it really wasn't serving the Lord in the best way we could possibly do it. So instead, well, now we've kind of learned our lesson, so we're selling our home and we're going to dedicate everything to our ministry. So that's going to be that. Yeah, you heard me. So if you're paying attention to this, you can see the video where I said that. So yeah, go back in the video archives, right? I probably said that at some other point. You'll see the video where I said this. Now I just told you that watching the video where I said it. But yeah, we're selling everything here, and we're moving to another place. And when we get there, we'll have our ministry. So we were given a very incredible opportunity to do something. So we're selling our home right now. I'm still working on it like I'm going to live here forever, but I know that God's called us to go someplace else. And now I don't feel like everything is meaningless. But let's get back to this. So 2:11, like the verses I told you to highlight. So if you read the whole thing yourself, I mean, which you're supposed to be doing, right? You knew we were going to talk about Ecclesiastes chapter 2, so you already read it. And you've probably done a couple rabbit hole things where you wanted to know more about King Solomon or King David. That's what I always do. I want to know who I'm talking about and like what were the circumstances surrounding this guy? You know, he had abundant wealth and everything else, and so he had everything at his disposal, everything, and didn't find any happiness. And here's the reason. All right, 2:11 is. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity, and grasping for the wind, meaningless. There was no profit under the sun. I gained nothing under the sun. That's where that comes from. So in the New American Standard Version, those are the two words. So instead of vanity, everything was meaningless. So we already know what he's about to do. I already read that little piece where he was going to do vineyards and all this fancy stuff, and he's already had his pleasurable times. So now, in chapter 2, verses 15 and 16, it says, So I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart, this is also vanity. For there is no more remembrance of the wise than of the fool forever, since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does a wise man die? As the fool. So that whole little thing right there, 15 and 16. So if you're smart or if you're stupid, you're still going to die. So if you're watching these and you think, boy, this guy's dumb, but guess what? We're both going to die. So so what purpose does it serve to be wise? If you're just wise on your own, all it does is make you more conscious of the fact that you're mortal. So there's been military jets flying all over. That's kind of odd. Is it really for these times though? We live in Florida where it used to be just mostly party goers flying here, but now it's different. Anyway, so yeah. So what happens to the fool? Same thing that happens to the wise guy. So what's the point, right? And then 18 and 19 is another deep one. So he figures out, then I hated all my labor in which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool, yet he will rule over all my labor in which I toiled, and in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. That's also a waste of time. It's also meaningless, because no matter how good and smart you are, you have to die and leave your stuff to somebody else. So all the stuff that you accumulate isn't worth anything, really. But also, God doesn't want you to be lazy. So there are instructions on what we're supposed to do. So we're not supposed to not toil, but how can we make our life of toil meaningful? So I think that's where he's going with this. And basically, that's Ecclesiastes chapter 2. So right now, in the world, we see a lot of vanity. We see a lot of things going on where, people have to have a certain designer brand. Now, that's been going on since I was a kid. You got to have, the girls wanted Jordache jeans.
Jordache.
Remember that? Yeah.
I was about 8 when that was a thing.
Yeah. So I was a little piece older. I was 12, so I already knew.
Rocky jeans and Z-caps.
Okay. Oh yeah. Now see, when I was in my young late teens, early 20s, I had Z-cap Ricci's all day long. I like to style a little piece, Yeah, back in the olden days. So those were. What was that store you went to in the mall? There was a store we went to in the mall that was like, the guy would put the tie on you and be like, "Hey, bro, that looks good." And then then they try to dress you out before you got out the door, and they try to offer you a credit card. Anyways, it was a bunch of dudes that a lot of times when if you were near a Marine Corps base, it was Marines that they had picked. They'd be like, "Hey, Marine, come here, buddy," and then they'd sell you like a recruiter on Z-cap Ricci's and a whole outfit. Well, I can't remember. It wasn't Hot Topic. It was some design, DJ design. I don't know. Anyways, doesn't matter. But yeah, so people are getting to the point to where not only are they covetous, but boy, I mean, they put everything else before God. And because that's a thing now, I think it's really a necessity that those of us who are Christ followers take a better look at the Bible and see some of the things that are in there, and maybe get our heads on right and get our biblical worldview and our perspective back in focus. And also, if you're a man, here's it's just a simple phrase you can use, like when someone tells you not to do something. I'm not suggesting that you use violence or anything, but I learned it by watching Planet of the Apes. And the ape said no. No. So you need to say no once in a while. Hey, we're going to have a transgender Soupy Sales Memorial Birthday Parade where all the men are naked and we're inviting toddlers. No. No. So just say no.